I want to thank you all for joining us on our First Fridays program of this new academic year. This morning, our speaker is Keith McIntosh, who has served as the Vice President for Information Services and Chief Information Officer at the University of Richmond since August 1st, 2016. Mac reports to the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, David Hale, and he leads a 74-person team and is responsible for the day-to-day management and strategic development of the university's information services organization. Mac brings more than 30 years of experience in information technology services within higher education and the military. Prior to joining the University of Richmond, he was the Chief Information Officer at Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, and at Pima County Community College District in Tucson, Arizona. Mac has a distinguished 24.5 years of service in the United States Air Force that includes a combat tour in northern Iraq. Mac was elected by his peers to the EDUCAUSE Board of Directors in 2017, and he's the first Chief Information Officer to serve on the National Association of College and University Business Officers Board of Directors. He's the first person to serve on both of these organization boards simultaneously, and he was the inaugural recipient of the EDUCAUSE Rising Star Award in 2011. Without anything further from me, I'd like to turn the program over to Mac so that he can discuss his role on campus and the work his team has done to pivot to remote learning and prepare campus for the fall semester. Take it away, Mac.
Thank you very much for that wonderful welcome. I'm going to set up and start to share my screen, if you guys don't mind. Pardon the picture of the family. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I really would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and for that wonderful introduction. I want to say thank you for taking some time out of your day to listen to an IT guy try to speak as non-geeky as I possibly can about what my team and I have done, mostly my team. So I'll just jump right in. My talk is kind of divided in a couple parts, and I'll pause at a few points to just see if there are any questions. But I'm very fortunate to serve as the Chief Information Officer at the University of Richmond. So I want to make sure you understand these are the things I'll talk about today. I'm going to cover these topics at a very high level. There's a lot more details that I could provide, but for the given amount of time and probably your attention span, I'll just stay brief. After each section, I will pause to see if there are any questions for me about what I just covered, most importantly. I'm going to talk a little bit about me. I mean, you heard some stuff in the bio. I'll probably expand on a little bit. I'm going to brag on my team every time I get an opportunity to speak publicly about what we do. It is really about the men and women who do this every day and often get unnoticed. And so it's my opportunity to praise them publicly and share their faces and what they do for you and the rest of the institution. I'll spend the bulk of our conversation talking about what we did to pivot to the remote and then get ready for remote. Get back to coming back to school in the spring and a little bit of what we did over the summer. I'll conclude each section again with a Q&A, and I'll conclude the whole talk with a Q&A. So getting started, a little bit about me. You know, as Rhonda said, I've spent 24 years in the Air Force. I'm also a military brat. My dad served 30 years. And so a lot of who I am and how I lead and how I interface with people and how I do things is based on a lot of the wisdom and guidance and instruction I've had of those many years serving in the military. I did conclude my career with a combat tour in northern Iraq, and it was one of those things where, my dad told me at some point, you'll know when it's time to get out of the military. And after going to a combat tour, that was really a kind of a hello wake-up call for me to say it's time to get out. And when I got out in 2008, I was very fortunate to get hired at Pima County Community College District in Tucson, Arizona, and progressed to become Chief Information Officer there. That institution, it was at the time that I was serving as CIO, was the 8th largest community college district in the country. So we had quite a large infrastructure and a lot of staff. Very fortunate to move to Ithaca College, where I cut my teeth on private liberal arts residential institutions, which helped me come here and be the CIO at the University of Richmond. I would be remiss if I did not mention that when I came here, I already inherited a very talented team who had been doing a lot of great work. They were led by my predecessor, a good friend of mine, Kathy Mundy. And just so you understand, because sometimes folks hear chief information officer and really don't have an understanding what that is. But basically, I'm responsible for the day-to-day management of all the strategic development of university information services. That's both the technology and the software. And one of my prime things that I carry with me each and every day is try to make sure that I am making sure that our IT investments remain ambitious, keeping University of Richmond on the front of the leading edge of what's happening in higher education, but also make sure it's aligned with what our institution's strategic objectives are, right? There's a lot of things in technology we could do, but we should be focused on those. What just happened there? Did I lose?
You are back now, Mac.
How much did I lose? Where did you guys lose me?
We lost you. I think it was on the slide where you were the picture of you speaking with your hands there, but we don't have the screen share. Let's
All right,
see.
let me start screen sharing again. This is an interesting day already. Sorry about that. It's never happened.
Oh, that's all right.
Let me share this again. That's a first for me. So
yes, right. I think we were right here, maybe the next slide.
All right. Slowly but surely, let me get set back up, you guys. All right, so let me just repeat, 24 years in the Air Force, concluded my career with a combat tour, served at 3 institutions, and our team, what I'm most responsible for as CIO is to help make sure our IT investments remain ambitious, aligned with the institution's strategic objectives, and committed to advancing our educational mission. Now, the University of Richmond has a very large, has a very complex, and we are well-resourced information technology infrastructure. The infrastructure and services are managed by the men and women in the Information Services Division, which you see here. I have the privilege of leading 74 dedicated and talented professionals who, collectively, we manage the campus technology resources. This includes telecommunications, email, wired and wireless networks, web services, administrative and academic applications, identity management services, course management, library systems, high-performance computing, digital scholarship, and information security. We also provide computing support for faculty, staff, and students, as well as in our public labs, research areas, and classroom spaces. We work with the campus community to provide robust and reliable and secure information resources and services that enable our faculty, our staff, and our students to excel in their academic and administrative pursuits. Our mission in information services is to partner with our campus community to provide effective and appropriate information technology services to enable the University of Richmond's strategic, academic, and administrative goals. So that kind of was a whirlwind start. Apologize for the technical difficulties, but are there any questions about what I've just covered before I move into the bulk of my talk? I don't know, and I'm like looking at I'll trust my colleagues, Megan, to help me out there.
We have nothing so far, but echo Mac's sentiment. If you'd like to put any questions in throughout the presentation, please feel free to do so in the Q&A.
All right, so I'm gonna keep moving. The university had been monitoring the coronavirus since, let's say, January. And as we all know, this was a very rapidly and changing situation. So we were messaging, the university was messaging the community on a weekly basis. We began communicating with the campus community on January 30th with our health alert. And then we continued to do that weekly. And then we notified the university community on March 16th that we would be doing 2 things. We would be moving to a remote learning for the remainder of that spring semester, and we would be shifting to remote work for our employees to the greatest extent possible. Now, since we were having these discussions at the highest levels, my team and I have been discussing and preparing for a pivot to do such a thing. When the coronavirus and COVID-19 forced our institution to pivot to remote learning and work, this set off a flurry of really unprecedented events and for information services. Our first and foremost priority, our immediate needs, was ensuring that all our community had access to computers, phone, and internet. Everybody was going to be leaving the campus, working from home. And so for our faculty and staff, many, like myself included, we have a laptop. The laptop I'm talking to you today from my house is the same laptop I take to work every day and use it on campus. But there were several who did not have a laptop. They didn't have any computer resources at home. So we had to work with faculty and staff to help them. What we did was allow them to take their desktop computers from their homes, from their office to their homes. That's definitely unprecedented, and we were not singular in that event. I was communicating with a lot of my colleagues, CIOs from around the country, and they were doing the exact same thing. We also learned that faculty, there were some faculty and some staff who did not have internet access at home. So how are they going to be able to work remotely? So we had to work with them to help provision resources so they could continue to do their work for the institution. Now, specific to our students, as a result of COVID-19, we had to ensure that students had the specific software they needed to access specialty software in the computer labs, right? Instead of being able to go to computer labs on campus, they're going to have to connect remotely. So my team had to do a couple things. We had to work with vendors to make sure that we can get that information provided in a way that our students could connect that way. But we also had students that had equipment needs. We found out that there were students that who did not have laptops at our institution. So how are they going to be able to participate in their learning, career learning journey? So what we did there was we were able to, we identified 33 students that were in need of computer resources. And so what we ended up having to do was ship many of those to their home locations, to include as far reaching as Turkey. 22 of those were connected via a financial aid portal that we had just established, which allowed them to put in a request to get such technology, and it was a partnership between information services and our financial aid offices. 7 of those students went to locations where they did not have any internet connection, so we had to make sure that we sent them mobile hotspots or mobile Wi-Fi connectivity so they could have internet connection. We also helped one student in Africa. This is interesting. Although we were not able to ship her a hotspot, we were working directly with her local internet provider to ensure that she had increased hotspot capability on her personally owned cell phone. So we were pulling out all the stops, trying anything and everything we could do, because there was no script for this, right? And we were doing the best we could to make sure our faculty, staff, and students had the resources they need. But we also quickly adjusted, we had to quickly adjust our software licensing and capacity. With this massive shift to remote work and learning, we needed to stay vigilant about cybersecurity. So we have a virtual private network, and I'm going to try to make sure I explain terms as I'm speaking so you have an understanding. A virtual private network is really our connection or your connection to a safer internet experience. For an example, it means that it enables a person to create a safe, encrypted connection to a private network, such as the University of Richmond, and from a non-private or a public network, such as your library, Starbucks, or your home, right? So although we had a private network, it was very limited, right? Because up into this case, we didn't have such a need to have such a volume of connections securely from remote. So our capacity at the time when we pivoted was only for allowing 750 users. And keep in mind, between faculty, staff, and students, we had well over 4,000 people. So 750 users is all we had at the time, and their speed of connection was going to be 300 megabits per second. Not bad, but at this volume and a number of people that might want to connect at the same time and do very network intensive work, we realized we needed to do better. So we rapidly worked to increase the capacity to 7,500 users, so almost a tenfold increase, with a throughput or speed of 1.5 gigabits. And we did that all within a week of our pivot. We also used Zoom. We had already used Zoom, but we didn't have near the licenses we needed. Zoom is our enterprise video conferencing, and as you're connected to it now, you understand what that is. We had at the time 40 licenses, which we kept kind of in reserve, and when somebody wanted one, we would just kind of hand out the license for them to make a connection and do what they needed to do. But now we had to have one basically for every student, every faculty, and every staff. So we quickly provisioned over 4,000 licenses. Each of those licenses had over 300 room or person capacity. And then we also procured 5 1,000 person licenses to support large community events, such as something that maybe the president would want to host, or our colleagues in admission and advancement, some of their events. We also needed a way to support our faculty, staff, and students remotely. When we were on campus, we could have the ability to run over to their office and support them. They could call and do things, but it's limited to be able, we're not going to be able to run all over wherever people live, where everybody lives to support them. So we needed to have a way to enhance our ability to provide support. And the way we had came across doing this, and it's just, I'd say it's very fortunate. We had started about 18, 19 months prior to January working on a new project, which was called Spider TechNet. This is basically a new service portal that we installed just before the end of the year last year, and it came in handy. This self-service portal is basically a website. It consists of a self-service portion and a self-help function. This enabled and empowered our students, faculty, and staff to request service, to find information without having to call us if they didn't want to do that, and to be able to register their own issues and resolve many of their issues on their own. With this portal, what was really nice about it, we could set up a couple of self-help resources for learning and remotely, and working remotely, which you see on the screen. We created a knowledge base articles to enable self-service. For example, how do you secure Zoom? We set up sessions like that. We created landing pages specifically for students so they can know where they needed to go. We set up landing pages specifically for faculty and staff so they know where they needed to go. And we also created a frequently asked questions section, which we are continually updating as we receive new input and new questions. We say, this might be beneficial for the rest of the campus community, so we make sure we put those in the FAQ. Now, the other benefit, those benefits were really external, but from an internal perspective, as the Chief Information Officer and as our team, we're only as good as the information we have, right? And a lot of times folks might want to phone a friend or shoot an email with somebody. One of the things that this new portal allowed us was to provide really great tracking of all the issues, so we could see things both by volume, by type, and frequency, as well as who was seeking assistance and the time it took us to resolve their issues, right? This allowed us to also see major trends and major issues. And the cool thing about it is, prior to us putting this information in, if there were challenges going on, I would have to call somebody on my team and say, what's the status? What's the status? With this, I was able to, anytime, any place, anywhere I want to, go in and see what the status, what certain things are. And I can look at the same data that my team is looking at. So that was very nice. But we, and I'm going to talk a lot about what we did as information services, but information services, just like everybody else on this campus, relied on everybody else on campus. There was a lot of partnership and collaboration. I'm going to talk about a couple. We partnered first and foremost with our newly formed Teaching and Scholarship Hub, which is led by Dr. Linda Boland. We had to quickly, within a week or within that week that we said we were going to pivot, we convened 2 training sessions for faculty on how to use Zoom, right? So this is basically a crash course. We had a couple hundred faculty show up for those, and we also did another session just for staff, right? To make sure that they were aware of how to use some of the basic or primary functions of Zoom. In the end, I think we had well over a couple hundred in each session. We also partnered with our business office, right? So we knew that, as I was just discussing, how we had to increase the number of licenses we had for VPN, increase the number of licenses for Zoom. Well, when you increase licenses, you're increasing your costs, right? And so we had to quickly set up, and these costs were really associated with COVID-19. And I really appreciate that our business office was saying that these are funds we want to track by these expenditures. So they set up a COVID-19 account for us to charge our necessary expenses, and that's where we put our additional licenses. But in addition to that, there were other challenges that some of our campus partners were trying to do. So for example, the business office had to adjust and do refunds for students because students were going to be leaving, and so they would need to get refunds for their housing and meal. Well, that type of capability wasn't defaulted into the system, so my team had to do some programming language and come up with some algorithms to help our business officers get to the answers they needed and to provide the data they needed to be able to do those refunds. We also assisted with our most recent CARES Act student refunds. So that kind of concludes rapidly what happened in the spring. Any questions there, Mick?
Yes, we've had one question come in from Stephen. So it says, Mac, the systems you're discussing are awesome. How expansive are these systems?
It's kind of interesting. I'm going to take it a couple ways because I'm not quite sure how expansive. expansive in the number of people that are using them, or expansive in its capability to reach. I'm not quite sure what he's asking, but I'll say this. You know, let's use Zoom, for example. And I'll talk another application, an example. With Zoom, like I said, we had 40 licenses and individuals would come and go. I mean, we could go a month and nobody wanted to use a Zoom license. And we could go maybe another month and 10 of the 40 would be used. Once we pivoted to remote and we procured 4,000 licenses for everybody, we were looking at the numbers. We don't look at it now. This is kind of anecdotal off the top of my head based on what I remember. I think we were well over 2,000 at one point, 2,000 to 3,000 simultaneous Zoom sessions. Folks were having Zoom sessions quite often. So we knew that that was the right choice to do. It quickly expanded our capability to do our ability to perform our mission, our academic and administrative mission. I don't know if that answers your question. If it's not, please help me with a clarifying question and I'll try to make sure I give you a good response. Anything else, Megan?
Nope, nothing else. I'll let you know if we have a follow-up, but so far so good.
All right, cool. So what do we do over the summer? All right, so the university started to think about all that we were going to need to do if we were going to open up for a residential experience in the fall. And information services was working really closely with our colleagues in facilities and in the registrar's office. Together, we evaluated over 300 classrooms and campus meeting spaces to determine which were the most suitable classrooms in preparation for fall 2020. So I want to just kind of paint a picture for you. Coming back in the fall, we knew we were still going to have COVID-19 with us, and we knew we needed to practice social distancing. If many of us who are alums know that the classroom setup is students are nearby other students. When you socially distance classes, you can't put the same capacity of students inside those rooms. So that's why we had to look closely at all the spaces to see where we could go to either continue to teach or start teaching in those spaces. In the end, after looking at all those 300 spaces, 148 spaces were identified, including a number of our existing classrooms, large meeting rooms, and several event spaces, and a group of newly constructed areas as well. So in addition to our academic buildings, we started finding places. We were putting classrooms in the Robbins Center, the Jepson Alumni Center, the Heilman Dinan Center, and the Cannon Memorial Chapel, just to name a few. These were transformed and outfitted for classes with social distance guidelines in mind. Now, while we were planning for the fall, we started looking at the spring to see what we had done well and what we could improve. So we assessed and monitored our pivot because that was very abrupt, and we did the best we could, on a kind of turn on a dime. And when you turn on a dime, there's things you probably didn't do as well as you could have, and there's things you could do better. So what could we learn? So we learned through formal and informal methods. First, the university had surveyed our students and faculty. And so when we got the results back from those surveys, we found out there were some things we did well, and then there were some things that we didn't do so well. And so there were some opportunities for improvement. Feedback was also shared with us. The university had started in preparation for planning for the fall. We had like 9 work groups who were focused on various aspects of returning to the institution for a residential experience. And as part of that journey, those different committees had different charges, but they all were receiving feedback. And so that was another way for us to get feedback. We also monitored the university's flexible teaching channel in Slack. Now, this was a very popular channel. Those of you who don't know what Slack is, it's basically a business communication platform, and it offers the ability to have chats or conversations online, text-based, via topic by private groups and direct messaging. So our colleagues in the hub set that up, and all the faculty started participating in there. And so it was great to just be able to join, listen, learn, monitor the types of challenges we're facing. So we were getting information that way, kind of informal. We also, the university, just as we're doing now, was having regular webinar conversations with our faculty and our staff and university-wide. And so we would, myself and several members of our team would make sure we would attend those. And we could listen and learn from the questions that were asked and the feedback that was shared. The biggest thing is just communications, right? We had phone calls, we had video meetings, we had internal communications that we were sharing with the university through our, our daily Spider Bites emails. We also used the service portal, Spider TechNet, and we were able to glean and get information from the from the requests we received or from the tickets that were submitted. Now, we use this information to help us plan for our future efforts. So it was both an assessment, but also like, okay, going into the fall, how can we rectify some of the challenges that our campus community experienced in the spring? So any questions there before I move on?
We have no questions, and Stephen clarified that his question was answered, and thank you very much. So.
Okay, that's good, Stephen. I want to make sure. As part of our scenario planning efforts, the university was preparing for the fall semester, as I said. But our focus was on the technology that was going to be needed in the classroom and in modular housing, and I'll talk about that next. So we were given a specific charge. Our charge was to implement a standard technology configuration that would address two things: the need for simultaneous in-room instruction and remote instruction at the same time, basically using Zoom. So I'm going to try to paraphrase what I just said. Imagine going to a classroom as a faculty member and having to wear your mask, be in a room that is not the normal room that you're teaching in, with less students in front of you because of social distancing. Those students were either going to be quarantined or in isolation in a private space, or at home because they chose to be a remote student, or be more in like an overflow room. So in addition to teaching to the students that you have in front of you, you have students that are going to be remote connected to Zoom, so you had to teach them both at the same time. That's what I'm trying to explain. Hopefully that was clear. This solution had to be able to scale across all the 148 spaces that I previously identified, right? In addition to completing the equipment installations, which we had a very short runway, once the determination was how we were going to do our fall semester, then that could let us know what we were going to try to do to provision technology. And by the time the baton was handed to us, we had kind of a short runway, about 3.5, 4 weeks to get this all done. As we were installing the equipment, as we were going into different rooms, we were quickly going behind those rooms, trying to set up training classes in those rooms, right? And I'll talk about that in a moment. Now, initially, we piloted this setup internally. So my team, I'm very proud of them. They came up quickly with a good solution, and then we brought in our campus colleagues. We develop and implement the standard technology configuration, but we did it also in collaboration with the Faculty Hub, as I mentioned, and with feedback from the Faculty Senate's Faculty Technology Committee. We also consulted with our deans, the 5 school deans, and we pulled in a select few faculty who were able to provide us some really good feedback to help us inform and tweak our configuration. We designed it to address, as I said, both the simultaneous in-room instruction and remote instruction, and that solution was scaled across all 148 spaces. So let's take a quick look. This is probably going to be the geekiest part of the presentation, but I would be remiss if I didn't be a geek just for a moment. So let's take a quick look at the technology configuration. So it looks like this, right? So the most critical piece of equipment, the equipment that is the key to this all, is really that each faculty has a laptop and they bring their laptop to the room, right? That's going to be the one consistent thing that they're going to bring to a consistent setup, right? It's highly recommended. We don't care if it's a PC or Mac. In each room, there's several pieces of hardware, and all those pieces of hardware are connected to this one USB-C hub, right? These are basically used throughout the campus. They've been used in many locations, but this connection facilitates ease of use for connecting that laptop to those other pieces of equipment, and it makes it so much easier for our faculty to go from a room in Jepson to a room in the chapel to a room in the Jepson Alumni Center and know that that setup is going to be consistent, right? There's a second display in the room, and what that second display is used for, when you connect to Zoom, as I'm looking right now, I'm looking at a laptop, and everybody's the size of a screen that could be on a laptop, but if you can extend that screen and put it onto a larger monitor, you can see your students much better, right? So I know that that's something very important for faculty, to be able to see their students and engage with their students and not have to look down at their screen. So that's one of those capabilities we added in each and every room. A key piece, a really essential piece, is this thing called a huddle cam, right? It's a device that incorporates a camera, a microphone, and a speaker all in one. And we place it in the front of the room. We have it facing the faculty member, and the camera is what allows the projection of their image to the remote audience, right? That's going to be on Zoom. And then the microphone picks up their voice and carries it also to the remote audience. Faculty could also, if they want to, use their laptop camera or personal microphone. We also installed a Solstice wireless pod, right? So the picture is probably not the best representation, but it is a device that typically connects to a standard display, and it allows connection to it wirelessly, right? Now, we had already started, I arrived here in 2016, I think 2017, my team started to install wireless pods throughout the campus, but it was not one that we were trying to get all done in 1 year. We're just doing a little bit by a little bit each and every year. When this happened, we had 44 spaces that were identified that didn't have any capability in them at all. So we had to rapidly procure that and put that in those spaces. But the cool part about that is that, as I said, this is a way for us to display the laptop video to the screen or display in the classroom. So the classroom students and the remote students can see what's going on. Now, what I don't have pictured here is we also have Zoom, and we also have a product called Panapto. It's our lecture capture or video content management system. So those were part of the standard technology configuration. Now, when we started down this path, when we first did the pilot, we didn't have microphones. But once we started bringing faculty in and faculty started talking about the challenges they're going to be facing, and it made perfect sense. I'm a former military person. I have no problem. You can ask many people on campus walking into a room and booming and projecting my voice, mask included, to another side of a room. I have no problem doing that. But I know if I had to do that for an hour, I would be fatigued. And so we needed to quickly, based on their feedback, provide microphones. So that's what we did. We installed these microphones, and they're now part of the standard configuration in each and every room. We had to push ours. So one other thing I'm going to say here, so it's interesting. We were not the only institution in the country, in the world, running into the same challenges. We were not the only institution trying to come up with the same solutions. And I know that we were very fortunate to quickly make some good decisions, and I'm really proud of my team for getting out in front and making the orders, because vendors and suppliers, none of them are sitting around with a lot of bench stock or surplus equipment, right? They don't want to have that sitting on the side. They have maybe just enough for, to expand for a little bit, maybe a couple months. So those who got in line first and ordered their equipment first would be able to receive it. Those who got in the line last may not get those. And so we were very fortunate to get all that equipment that I talked about on the last screen and able to get some microphones. We put that order, we were able to push to get that in, and we were successful. The document camera you see here is basically a glorified overhead projector, but it's important for those faculty who like to display an object and have somebody look at an object, and it's a way to display it both up on a screen for the in-room classroom students, but also for the remote students. So when we completed, this is what the rooms look like. On your left is pictures, the top and bottom are pictures of a newly renovated space in Jepson Hall. And on your right is a classroom that we converted quickly in Weinstein International Center. And so if you look real closely, I don't know if you can tell, in the floor, everything is already socially distanced for 6 feet apart. And there's little dots, I love this, there are dots that our facilities colleagues have put in. So just in case students happen to move their desks, we can quickly see that they're within their 6 feet bubble, and we can correct and put things back to it where they should be. Now, I'm going to give you a quick high-level timeline. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail later. Basically, June 26th is when this was finalized, the configuration, and that's when we ordered our equipment. And the equipment arrived over the next couple of weeks, and then we had everything installed, tested, and finalized by the 23rd of August. And that's right, 23rd of August. So that was like the Sunday before the start of the semester. So my team was working around the clock. We were working weekends to make sure we could hustle to get all this equipment in place, right? We ordered the microphones that I just talked about in the large rooms on August 17th. And we were very fortunate to continue to push and get those in so students would be able to hear. We ordered additional microphones. Something that came up, we found out in the, kind of like the bewitching hour, is that the faculty like to teach where they have students be able to engage with other students. Makes sense, right? It wasn't something that was top of mind for us. We were just thinking about the faculty member talking to the students both in class and remotely, and that's what our charge was. But we quickly found out that part of the academic experience is for students to engage with one another. So imagine social distancing and then having students remotely engaging with students in the classroom. and we needed to be able to have some type of capability so they could be seen and heard. So in those really large spaces, we had to order some of those big boom microphones that you might see in the movie sets, and we have those strategically placed in different parts of the classroom so that their voices are amplified, and so students, no matter where they are, can hear each other. Now, while we were completing the setup in each teaching location, we launched training sessions for our faculty. And as I said, we were very fortunate to have the Spider Tech Next set up. When we scheduled and convened in-room training workshops for the equipment that had been set up, we informed our faculty via Spider TechNet portal and provided the ability for them to sign up. Now, our preference and recommendation was please come in, do this class in person, which many of them took advantage of, but many of them did not. So we also had the ability for them to consume the training virtually if that's what they so choose. And then we encourage them, highly encourage them that after they receive the training to help submit what they're learning and get comfortable with it, go to the place where they were going to be teaching and keep practicing and trying it out, because everybody is very individualistic in what their needs are and how they teach. And so we wanted them to go to get comfortable with the technology. So the next slide shows 2 training sessions and a technology implementation. So on the left side, you can see 2 trainings that we did, and the top left was something in the, I think it was in Booker Hall or Maudlin Center, I believe. That was a training session for faculty, and the bottom one is one where, and I'm going to talk a little bit later. Those of us know the Robbins Center. When you come in the Robbins Center, the concourse level, we took basically the 4 corners of the concourse level and converted those into teaching spaces. So that's what you see depicted there. And some of my staff are in there teaching faculty how to use the technology. Classroom setup, just kind of quick picture because there was so much going on, but basically we had to order those displays, receive those displays, mount those displays, and take those displays out to all the 148 teaching locations. Again, we did all the training from July 29th to August 21st, the Friday before the start of the fall semester. During those 23 days, we scheduled workshops in almost all the 148 classroom spaces. Now, I say almost all because some of those places were not online yet. There were work that was being done, so we couldn't go in as technologists to work in those spaces until they were physically done and ready for us to receive and put equipment in. This gave faculty equipment opportunity to train in the rooms that they were going to be able to teach, and we also trained them on, provided a separate workshop for Blackboard, which is our learning management system. We taught them some basics like how to use grading rubrics, how to use a Safe Assign, which basically is a plagiarism prevention tool, and how to do assessments. In the end, we ended up, in addition to installing in all those spaces, we offered 140 workshops and 350 faculty registered to attend those sessions. So here's what the classrooms looks like in session, right? Several of these pictures I took myself, but that top right was a picture that I snagged from a LinkedIn profile from Dr. Joel Meyer. This is his introduction to marketing class, and he is teaching in one of those 4 constructed classrooms on the concourse of the Robbins Arena. So just imagine that, those who are former students, to think about having to have a class there. Interesting. The university also secured modular units for isolation and quarantine of residential students outside of the occupied residential facilities. And so this is what this looks like. That picture on the truck on the top left was one I took last Friday evening about 5 o'clock when I was leaving the campus, as it was coming up River Road to be put in place. And the picture on the bottom left are those that are already in place, right? So as these are coming in, my team would stop what they were doing and run over and work with our colleagues in residential life and housing to ensure that they were ready and done in a timely manner as soon as we received the unit. We were responsible for making sure that we put TV in there, and most importantly, internet capability there, and they had a phone capability. So I'm almost an end. I appreciate you guys hanging with me, and hopefully I'm not been too geeky. But no presentation would be complete without a little sharing of some data, right? So let's share some data. I'm sharing this to kind of give you an indication of our workload and demand, right? So what you see here is a slide, and I'll try to walk you through it so you don't have to worry about the colors and the numbers. I'll walk you through it. It's basically on the far left-hand side is the first, these are week endings. So these are weekly. This is 36 weeks, I believe. Week ending December 19th, 2019. So basically the last week of 2019. And then August 30th of 2020. During this time frame, we received 19,326 tickets. That's an average of 500 tickets per week, or just over 100 a day. And however, you'll see three significant spikes. First occurs in January, and that happens to coincide as something that typically happens at the start of a semester. We go away for a couple of weeks, we come back, and if you're like me, you don't remember everything. Sometimes people forget their password. They might have connectivity issues. So this is not that typical. And again, this is kind of pre-COVID, before we're going to do anything with COVID. January 5th was the first number, 593, and then January 12th week ending was 821 tickets. Now, if we look at the second spike, this was the one when we pivoted. This is when we departed the campus rapidly, right? You can see the volume of tickets went up pretty high. Without COVID hitting, those numbers would have been on par with the other weeks that you saw that are down, that are kind of lower scale. And March 15th, that week, we had 1,014. So that first week we rolled off campus, there was a lot of questions. There were a lot of challenges, right? Folks were taking their computers home. People were taking their desktop phones home. They were not sure, even though we had set up things in Spider TechNet, folks still weren't comfortable on how to get those things set up. And then when they did get it set up, certain things weren't working with the software, things of that nature. So there was a lot of calls. The following week it tapered down, but not by much. It was 809 tickets on March 22nd. The third is the start of this academic year. And the first number is August 9th, the week ending August 9th, 2020. We had 903 tickets. And then the following week was August 16th. We had 1,624 tickets. And then the next week we had 1,309 tickets, right? So what you see is that, you know, we've been busy. I mean, I think we were always busy, but we've been busier, right? And the work continues. But before I close, I have to come back to my beautiful, wonderful team. This has been a very unprecedented journey for us. I tip my hat virtually and to our faculty and our students who've had to adjust to this new normal. I cannot imagine, right? They have been remarkable. Our faculty and our staff have been, our faculty and our students have been remarkable through this whole journey, both in March with that crazy pivot they had to do, and for what the expectations and guidelines and limitations we put forth for the start of this academic year. Now, to remind you, we have 74 professionals in information services. Each of them have specific expertise and responsibility. Individually and collectively, we work to ensure that the university has access to the technology resources they need to teach, learn, and work. I'm very proud of each and every one of them, as it is a privilege for me to lead them, especially through such extraordinary times that we're going through. Now, I would be remiss if I did not share, I say we have 74 people, and I know there's somebody up here counting the faces, doing the numbers. I don't have pictures for everybody on my team, so there will not be 74 faces, but that's the bulk of my team. But because just like when you go to a doctor, you have different aspects. You have a podiatrist, you have a cardiovascular surgeon, you have a rheumatologist. Not all doctors are the same. Well, not all IT people are the same. And we have our lanes that we work in, and we have an expertise that we work in, and collectively we work together. And I say that to just say that all the work I talked about when it comes to the classroom technology and working on getting the modular trailers put in place was done by 6 people over 3.5 weeks. There are many moving parts and so many people who have contributed to the university's pivot in the spring and the return in the fall. Today, I focus fully on our team, information service, what the men and women of our division have done. We did this in partnership and collaboration with many folks on campus. We are grateful for their efforts, and our work is still not done. So this concludes my presentation. Hopefully it was enjoyable. I'd love to take this time to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Mac. That was awesome. We have a couple questions. So 3 that kind of follow the same pattern here from Mary, Evan, and Terry are, like, how much did it cost to make all of this happen? What was the budget impact to cover all this equipment? Where did the money come from? Just kind of what were those ballpark estimate numbers for financial costs, if you can answer that.
I really can't answer that, and I'm not trying to be obtuse. I just don't have those numbers readily available because that number moves. I will say that, and hopefully my boss won't beat me up about this. And when I say the VP, the EVP for Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer Dave Hale is my supervisor. He's also the CFO. And I'll just talk real broad. The university always has contingency money sitting around, and sometimes it's used and sometimes it's not used. We're definitely using it now. And I think, that there was a pot of money that's set aside, if you will, for such purchases. And I know that those numbers are definitely close to six figures, I would say, in total right now. But I think that's a minimal investment considering what we're trying to do. And I'm so thankful we live in a day and age where we could do such a thing with the technology, because having been in technology for 35 years now, 25 years ago, we could not have done what we're doing now.
Sure. We have another question from Steven. So he asked, I'm not sure if you'll have insight into this or not, but as an osher member, how is IT part of or embedded in that program?
Well, I will say that I don't know if we are embedded in osher. I know the most recent thing I can think about, I think it's a wonderful question, is one of my staff, our Chief Information Security Officer, Shauna Sumter, spoke to osher about cybersecurity, and when we get opportunities to partner, we do, based on whatever their needs are. I believe that just like anybody else who has a formal relationship, and I think osher does, with the University of Richmond, they get access to the technology resources that we provide for everybody. So that would be a high-level response to that question.
Awesome. And he had another question as well. And again, not sure what insight you have into library services, but as an end user, how should I prepare to access university library services?
I will have to yield to our colleagues in the library. I don't want to speak. I would be ill-informed to answer that question. I apologize.
Sure. And then final question here from Emily. What was most exciting to you about the pivot? Is there any new technology we were able to bring onto campus that your team is most geeked out about?
Thank you, Emily. I think I know what Emily that was. Most excited, I guess it's whether you want to look at the glass is half full or glass half empty, right? I've always been a glass half full guy. I think this has brought in, let's say it's not so much the technology. A couple things. I'm going to rephrase that and put this back out here this way. For the longest, there's been a conversation, and it's been running in higher education, about online learning versus in-residence learning. And this is just my personal, please don't take this away as fact. This is just my view, right? I think you ask 1,000 people, you get 1,000 different views of this. There's always been this view that online learning is not on par with in residential learning. I'm not here to decide that. I kind of believe that that's probably true, but the chasm between the two was always I think it was over-exaggerated, that this was that much greater and this was that much worse. And I think what we're learning, what was forced to happen, was many institutions, and were had to force to go that way. So I think sometimes this has now created an opportunity for faculty to get exposed and students to get exposed to this in a way that helps them go, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. Now, granted, choices would be always to do in residence. That's primary our value. That's our business model. I think that is our way to educate our students, and I think it works. But I do now think that there's a complementary factor of how can I incorporate principles from online learning into my normal teaching and learning in a way that enhances the ability for our students to consume and understand the technology. I also think one innovation that's going to come out of this, possibly, it may not seem so innovative, is starting to think about how we were able to run a college with everybody basically working from home, right? And so there's always been this thought in my mind, like, most campuses and universities are landlocked, right? We can't grow our physical capacity, but what would happen if we could say that we could convert part of our land or part of our buildings to be more academic spaces, meaning that we didn't need as many people working on campus. They could still be working for the university, but they could serve the university in a different way. From a technology, Emily, I know that's what you're looking for. I think the biggest thing is I could believe that at some point in the future, what we've set up as a standard technology configuration is basically, a table in the front of the room with the devices I talked about. There is a suite that you can implement that is all that packaged in one. Now, will we need it everywhere? I don't know. But could we use it going forward? Yes. And are we more open to the idea now that we've had that? Yes. If we were to not have the pandemic happen and I was to pitch such a thing, folks might go, do we need that? Because of this, now folks could say, oh yeah, I can see absolutely how we could need that. And that would be better because then it would be a much more robust capability in the classroom. So hopefully I answered your question, Emily.
That was great. We have one more question, and I know it came in. So in normal times, how do you determine what computers freshmen should bring to campus? I'm not sure if that's something your office determines or not, but if you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I think so. So that's a great question. So each and every year, we have a process for our own personal computers or work computers that we use on campus. And we go through, we understand what standards are out there, how the standards are moving. And we have a process where we do computer replacement for our own personal computers. Well, those replacements are based on standards to make sure that first and foremost, the equipment we have is the best purchase we can make and has the base capability. And the most important thing is it can run all the applications that we need to run within our academic or administrative space. So that kind of sets the standard for what we say is our students would also need as well. And so we take those same standards for PCs and our Macs, depending what their preferences are, and we publish that in a space for students. We work with our admissions office and our enrollment management office to share that information so students can know that information ahead of time. So if they're going to purchase equipment, they would purchase equipment, whatever they wanted, whether they wanted the Dell, where they wanted the Lenovo, or where they wanted them at Mac, but it had to have those minimum specs. So that's what we do. We don't tell them what systems to buy, but we say, hey, make sure it has these minimum specifications.
Great. And then we just have one more comment, not really a question, from Stephen again. Awesome presentation. Thank you so much for all of the information. So
You're very
thank
welcome,
you.
Stephen. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to thank UMAC for spending your time and sharing with us some really vital information that was very interesting, very informative. And I want to thank everybody for participating in today's First Fridays program. Next month, we have as our speaker Patrick Benner, who may be the only one who's worked as hard as McIntosh.
He worked harder
over the summer.
He worked.
Patrick is our Director of Housing and Residence Life on campus, so you can only imagine what that guy has been going through the last several months and continues to go through, but he's a great guy. He's an engaging speaker, and I invite you all to join us in October. And thanks again for everybody joining us. Thank you, Mac. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.
You guys, thank you very much. Take care, everybody.